One thing that Stella and I, like one of our main goals as married couples, one of our first goals is to be completely debt free. I don't want to share the amount that we have together because it's a pretty significant amount. But the goal is to be debt free by the end of 2020, and so we have about a year and a half to do that, and that's going to be our first goal. There, that way we can be debt free, just save everything we make, and we owe nobody nothing, and that's how we want to live. And so,
We'll tell you how much debt we paid off
yes, at the end.
at the end after we succeed.
Yes, today is April 29th, 2019, and this is the beginning of our debt free journey. Are you ready, Stella?
Yes.
Yes, high five. Woo! All right, $120,000 in debt. Yeah, that is how much debt my wife and I calculated right after we got married, and we were like, how are we gonna get out of this debt? And we tried to make it a goal to be debt free by the end of 2020, and we did. And so in today's video, I kind of wanted to share the journey, the process, methods, and strategies we use, things we wish and didn't do, and just kind of share like that whole journey and the process of what it was like being in debt and what it's like being out of debt. If you are currently in debt and trying to pay off your debt, I completely understand how that feels. And so hopefully this video can serve as a tool. Hopefully it can motivate you to be out of debt and get out as soon as possible. Today's video is going to be kind of formatted like a podcast, so you guys can go ahead and just do some other things. Listen in if you guys want to watch the video. Awesome. But if you're new to this channel, welcome. My name is Eddie. I like to talk about personal finance, money, cryptocurrency, investing, and all that stuff on this channel. So consider subscribing if you're new. But other than that, guys, let's begin. So the first thing Stella and I did when we got married in April of 2019 is we sat down and we calculated all the debt that we had. So that meant like car payments, both of our student loans, personal debt, and loans that we might have pulled out. And once we saw the final number, which is around $119,500, $600 something, I think I was mind blown because I've never had that much money in my life. I've never in a year made that much, right? Even with our combined income, Stella's and mine, we were like, there's just no way that we're ever gonna pay this off. And even before marriage, I would look at my student loans alone and I would feel overwhelmed to the point I would even cry at some nights. I know it sounds silly, but it was to the point where I would think like, when am I ever gonna live my life? When am I ever gonna be able to go out and buy the things that I want to without worrying about my budget? When am I ever gonna be able to go out and afford food, buy food for people without thinking about my credit card payments or my student loan payments? And I wasn't around $40,000 in debt before marriage, and then after we got married, you can imagine it almost tripled, right? You know, before marriage, it's Eddie's debt and it's Stella's debt. But after marriage, there is no yours and mine. It becomes a us, a we, an our thing, right? And so we both understood that. We were okay with that. We just made sure that we had a plan to pay this off as soon as possible so that we can start doing the things we want to do in life. We broke the debt down into three categories, the smallest one being the car payment, which is around $8,000. Then we had the personal loans slash credit cards, which was around $34,000, and the student loan, which was the highest, of course, student loans, 77.5K. It was a majority of it. So after we calculated how much debt we were in, we brought all the money that we had from our savings account and the money that we received as gift from our wedding, and we just paid off a good chunk of our debt. That's like the first thing that we did, which was around $40,000. A lot of people, usually after they get married, they would use some of that gift money that they received or savings to go on a really good honeymoon, to buy new clothes, to buy new furniture and really nice furniture. But for us, we were like, you know what? Let's not do that the first year of our marriage. Instead, let's just try to pay this debt off as quick as possible. So the first day we shaved off $40,000, which left us with only around $80,000 in debt remaining. And so that pretty much eliminated all of our personal loans, credit card loans, because those had the highest interest rate. And so we used the avalanche method, which is pay off the highest interest rate debt first, and then work your way down to the cheapest ones, which were like our student loans. The other method people like to use is the snowball method, which is paying off your smallest debt amount first, and then working your way up, paying off the larger ones. For me, I didn't like the interest that builds up on certain accounts, so wanted to get those rid of first. About a half of the personal debt was from the wedding, and the other half was from like past debts, right? Whether it was buying clothes or buying necessities, because before marriage and before my business took off, I was literally broke. Like I had $0. I wasn't making anything. This was back in like 2015, 16, 17. All the camera gears that I bought for my vlogging channel, which was this channel, was all on credit, right? And so yeah, I was in a lot of debt, and some could argue that was good debt. To me, okay, to me that was considered good debt. Debt that I used to build up the things that I have today. Bad debt is consumer debt, right? So buying clothes that I don't need, or buying things I don't need, spending too much or a large amount on food that is very unnecessary. Also, about $12,000 of that debt was a loan that was pulled under my name for a family member. It's one of those things where, like, they needed help at the time. They wanted to pull a loan under my name, and I agreed to it, and I wanted to help them out. And they said they would pay back, and they never did. And this was about 7 years ago, so I was a lot more naive. I trusted people easily, and it's one of those things where, like, hey, if I loan you money or if I let you borrow money, I expect people to pay back. Like I always pay people back, right? And so I expected the same thing, but in this case, it would always be like, I'll eventually give it to you next month, and it never did. And so got to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna pay it off. It's totally fine. Don't worry about it. And so I think an advice would be never allow a family member, even if it's your mom or your dad, to pull a loan out under your name, because you just never know what's going to happen. It's one of those things where, like, they'll even say, like, I promise I'll pay you back, but they might not, right? And so just be very careful if you guys ever come across to that point, especially if you're young, because if you're like 18, 19, 20, and you're just building your credit score, and your parents might have bad credit scores, they're going to take advantage of that credit score to pull out a loan under your name, and they might co-sign it. And just don't do it. Don't go there. I promise, don't do it. Next is student loans. I believe that it's the second largest debt in the US. I think we hit something like $1.7 trillion in debt, 2021 alone. There is a documentary called, or a series called Money Explained on Netflix. And there's a section called student loans. I highly 100% encourage, 10 out of 10, encourage you guys to watch that, especially if you're going to college, or you're thinking about going to college, or if you just graduated high school. If you graduated college and you are currently in student debt, still watch it. I think it's a good watch. But student loans is definitely both Stella's and mine biggest regret. Like, it's one of those things where, like, we wish we didn't go to college, right? Even college itself, we didn't want to go, but our parents really wanted us to go, so we did. They encouraged us to pull out loans because they were like, oh, you can always pay it back later. But then as an 18, 19, 20-year-old, you don't understand the concept of a loan. As an 18, 19, 20-year-old, you perceive loans as free money, right? I'm receiving free money from the school, free money from the government. And then after I graduate college, I'm going to get a job that pays 60 a year, and I'm going to be able to pay that loan off in about 1 to 2 years. When in fact, it doesn't play out the way that you exactly want it to play out after you graduate, because you're going to realize everything's expensive. Like, the living cost is expensive. You're going to have other expenses later on, especially after 4 years you graduate. There's going to be a 2% inflation rate every single year. And so by the time you graduate and you get a job, everything in the world is much more expensive. On top of that, if you're only paying the minimum amount every single month, then you're only paying the interest on that loan. I have a cousin who, I remember she shared a story of how she was paying off her student loans every single month, and she revisited that payment, I think, a couple months later, and she realized she hasn't paid off anything. Like, the initial principal is the same, and she was like, what am I paying for? And it was the interest. And so it's not that I'm against college. I love education. I highly encourage and recommend learning and education for everybody, but certain colleges are very, very expensive. And if you can't afford it, I highly recommend you to rethink and process. You can definitely choose a community college route, because I know a lot of people who did that route and transferred over who saved a ton of money. It was a very smart decision. If you are going to go to college and you're going to pull out student loans, I highly encourage you and recommend talking to 5 people who have been to college and graduated and that are currently paying off their student loans, and 5 people who graduated college and paid off their student loans, and ask what the process was of currently paying and how it feels after paying. Because you want to understand, is $20,000 a lot? Is $60,000 a lot? Is $120,000 a lot? Because everyone comes out with different amounts of loans. And if you're coming out with like under 20K, I would consider that pretty good. It's not horrible. I don't recommend it, but it's not as bad as people who come out with 40, 60, 80, $8,000 in loans. So either work, save, and then go to college, or work your way through college, or find grants so that your college is paid for. Unless you have parents who are going to pay your way through college, that's completely okay too. But just understand that college is one of those things that Stella and I we're glad that we went and we're glad that we finished, and we don't necessarily regret the college experience and kind of the education that we received, but we wish that we understood what we were getting ourselves into in terms of like loans and debt before we went. That way we could have made a much more firm and stern decision of saying yes or no to our parents. The last thing that we paid off was the car. There was about $8,000 remaining on it, and we decided, you know what, let's get rid of it so that we don't have to worry about monthly payments anymore. It was a brand new car that Stella bought back in 2016 with the help of her mom. I didn't have a car just because I worked from home and lived in my studio, worked from my studio. Pretty much my studio is my home. And so when we got married, it became my car as well, right? And so now it's nice to be able to drive around. But I think, having a new car, buying a new car, it's nice. I would say it's not a horrible thing. But now knowing what I know today, I would never want to buy a new car again. I think within the first year, a car loses, I think, anywhere between like 20 to 40% of its value. And so a car is technically a really bad investment unless you buy a specific type of car that goes up in value or stays in value over the years. But buying a used car is always going to be the better route to go in the long run. I think a lot of people that I know who are really good with their finances and manage their money really well tend to buy used cars. They don't even lease new cars, they buy used cars. And I think within the past year, a lot of people working from home realized that they didn't need the car that they were driving because they were making unnecessary monthly payments on a car that they weren't even driving. And so I think be very careful when you choose a car. Buying a used car is always a better way to go. Stella and I, we share a car and we make it work. Although it would be nice to have two cars sometimes, we try to hold back on it because we don't need it. Now, I kind of want to share the mindset and the process that we went through as we were paying off this debt. Because when we decided to be debt free by the end of 2020, at April of 2019, that gave us around 20 months to be debt free. Now, $120,000 is a lot of money, and it still is a lot of money to me. I think there are times where like I imagine like, man, if I just invested $120,000 into cryptocurrency, into Bitcoin, when it was under 10K, imagine like how much I would have now. Like I think about that sometimes, but past is the past. Stella always says, just let it go. But I will say that I was very confident that we would be debt free. Now I say that saying that I had a lot of doubts in my mind as well, right? I wasn't 100% sure if we can be debt free by the end of 2020, just because I never made that much within a year span. Like it didn't make any sense to me. I tried to calculate numbers and was like, okay, if I make around this much a month, how can I pay off our debt by this year? Mathematically, it just made no sense. But by faith, I constantly just believed every single day we're going to be debt free. We're going to be debt free. And so I run a small screen printing shop. It's an independent shop where I run it by myself, and I would say yes to every single job. I would say yes to every opportunity there was. Anytime I got an opportunity to get paid out, even just a few couple dollars, I would say yes. And I would look for extra work. I worked late nights. I would do all-nighters like every other night, because the best thing you can do if you want to try to get out of debt as quick as you can is to increase your income, because oftentimes it's not a savings problem, it's not a budgeting problem, it's an income problem, right? Because let's say you make $40,000 a year and you have around $60,000 in debt and you want to pay that off within a year. No matter how hard you budget, no matter how hard you save, you're not going to be able to pay that $60,000 off with only $40,000. The only way that you're going to be able to pay that $60,000 quicker is to increase your income. And so that's going to be the first thing that I encourage most people to do, that if they can, to pick up extra shifts, start a side hustle, create extra income somehow, some way. Next is food, right? And so we cut down on eating out significantly. We decided that we would only eat one day out of the week. So that means that on like a Sunday, we would go out and eat, we would grab dessert, and that would be our like budget for spending money on food at restaurants. And 6 out of the 7 days we would eat at home. We wouldn't spend money. We wouldn't buy dessert or drinks that we wanted to drink, like boba. We love boba, but there were many, many days where we were like, no, we cannot do that. We would meal prep. So we would go to Costco and buy bulk amount of food, cook it all at once, put them in containers, put them in the freezer or the fridge, put them in the microwave, and eat it like that. There are some days where it got pretty boring to eat, but we were very adamant and very determined to pay off our debt as quick as possible, and that meant sacrificing food for a year. When you are in debt, you are literally a slave to that debt. That debt, it becomes your master. It will tell you what you can and cannot do, the way you think, the way you feel. And I understand this because I grew up thinking that debt was normal because a lot of my family members were in debt and they were like, yeah, when you can't afford things, use your credit card. And so the concept of debt was very normalized for me. It was a very normal thing to be in. But once you understand what it feels like to be out of debt, you never want to be in debt again. If you're currently in the process of paying off your debt, I just want to encourage you to keep going at it. Compound interest is evil unless it's through your own investments, right? But compound interest on a debt is literally gonna kill you. And so pay more than the minimum amount if possible if you're currently working on paying off your debt. Also, if you've never heard of Dave Ramsey, you should definitely check him out on YouTube. On his radio show, you hear tons of stories of people either they're trying to get out of debt or they're in debt or they have money questions, and Dave Ramsey just does a great job of explaining and counseling people on what actions to take. When you hear those stories, it really gives you an idea of the situation, the current state of our world of people in debt. Debt is a worldwide problem. You'd be surprised of the stories that you hear. Like, you hear stories of people who are like, yeah, we have this nice home, we own these types of cars. It sounds like they have a really wonderful life, but they're like, but we're in $300,000 in debt. We don't know what to do. It's a problem. We need to fix this. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is investing. I highly recommend and encourage people to invest if they can, not just into cryptocurrency, but into the stock market, into your Roth IRA. Now, in the US, we do have something called a Roth IRA where you can contribute to it every single month, every single year. And the money that you pull out when you retire is all tax-free. So most average Americans can, I was going to say graduate, retire as a millionaire if they are disciplined with their finances, with their money. But not a lot of people know about Roth IRA or investing in general. The reason why I want to talk about investing is because if you are currently in debt, I don't encourage you or recommend you to even start investing at all. The best thing that you can do, the best investment that you can make is to pay your debt off first, because I tried investing while I was in debt, and I will say it was very not stressful, but there would be like days where I'd be like, dang, my investment is going down. Is this smart of me to invest? Versus me being completely out of debt, and every extra income that I make, I throw it into the market, right? Whether it's the cryptocurrency market or the stock market. And I don't stress at all when my money or investment goes down because I add more into it. It's important to work for your money, but it's also better if your money works for you. I think that's a very important philosophy and truth. So if you're investing while you're in debt, consider, just finish paying that debt off first and then continue investing. Even if it's like a couple $100 or $1,000, $2,000, just finish paying it off, right? Just pay it off so you don't have to think about it ever again, and then invest much more aggressively. And we also cut up all our credit cards. So we only stuck with debit card and never used our credit card. The only credit card that I had was for my business. And so it was a business credit card, and that was okay because, money is flowing in. I was able to pay it off every single month. But in terms of our personal credit cards, we cut them up. We didn't use it. We only stuck with debit. I know people like to talk about like their credit score and, building up your credit, but there's definitely a different habit that you build when you use your credit card and your debit card. At least for us, it's not the case for everybody. There are some people who are really good at disciplining their finances and paying off their credit card every single month. If you're one of those people, great. But there's a shift in your mind, right? So if you're about to buy a $100 shoe and you use your credit card, there's a lot less pain, right? But if you were to give $100 in cash, then you might reconsider buying those shoes, right? So when you use a debit card, you have that same feeling as if you're paying with cash. And so that's kind of, something that we did that helped us. If it helps you, great. If it doesn't, stick with what works for you. I really thank God for this entire process, because without God, like, none of this, I can confidently say that none of this was possible, because when 2020 hit, my business took a huge hit. Financially, it was the worst time of my life. But for some crazy reason, I don't even know how. Like, I promise, like, I have no idea how everything worked out. By God's grace, somehow I made enough every single month that I was able to pay off like the amount that we were planning to pay off every month. And by the end of 2020, we were completely out of debt at the worst time, the worst year ever. I don't know how that was possible. it was a blur to me. All I remember was just like constantly working, trying to find opportunity. Like, how can we save? How can we make more? And every month, somehow we had enough money to pay off like whatever we had to pay off. And so, it feels great to be debt free. I will say that. I want it for everybody. Like I know my mom and Stella's mom is also in some debt right now, and my like not dream, but it'd be really nice if we could one day just like help like obliterate their debt, like pay it off, get rid of it, so that they can enjoy the rest of their life. Like it sucks seeing both of our parents always stressing over money and not having enough, and wishing that they could do certain things, but that they can't. And I can't imagine what the rest of the world is going through. And so I'm gonna do my best to create content on this channel where that will help people build up their financial education, financial literacy. Hopefully, I can grow at the same time and learn more as well, because it's a journey and it's a process. So hopefully, everything I shared was helpful to you. And if you're currently in the process of paying off your debt, I promise it will be so worth it after you're finished paying off, because all the money that you pay off every single month now will just be sitting in your bank account, and you're going to be saving that. And that is the beginning of wealth creation, preservation, whatever you want to call it, wealth building. And it's going to be amazing. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up. Feel free to share this with anybody that this video might be helpful to. And if you have any questions or comments, leave it down below. Other than that, guys, I'll see you guys in the next video. Over. Good night, good morning. Adios.